Hello, welcome to another edition of Trade Talk. I'm here with Jazz. I'm Karl. We're going to talk about all the latest trading action, Brownlow, the ladder, etc. The premiership market's moving up and down. It's pretty crazy. I've got a really good lay this week. I'm looking forward to getting stuck into it. But Daz, big weekend of footy again.
Yeah, it was nice to be on. We spoke last week about how the Giants had shortened a bit in premiership markets, but if you look at it now, there's 5 teams between $6 and $8.40 in the premiership market. Obviously, Collingwood starting to find their mojo, Carlton with a huge statement win, Swans good, Giants good, D's still around the mark even though they didn't play. So yeah, it's really, really tight there. It's probably the tightest that premiership market has been in a while, because Collingwood were very short most of last year, and it's been the Giants, Swans and D's that have dominated generally this year in the market.
And let's talk about the West Coast Eagles. Yeah. That was a bit of a shock, wasn't it?
Yeah, it just kept building. I mean, teams start well, but every time I was watching the Brisbane Geelong game mainly, but every time you'd flick over, it would be 3 goals to zip, 4 goals, 5 goals, 6 goals, 7 goals, and the horse was out the gate, so to speak, and West Coast just demolished them. And for Fremantle, it would be enormously frustrating, because we spoke last week, they were very good in Adelaide over the course of a fortnight, played well in both games, could have won both of them, got nothing out of it. Then you put in a shocker, so all of a sudden your season falls back to 3-3. They'd be really, really annoyed, I think.
They're really sucking teams in, Fremantle, aren't they? And they did the exact same last year, had a couple of great wins, and everyone thought top 4, the higher half of the top 8, and then they just lose badly. That was a bad loss. No, not talking down West Coast at all. Well done for getting that win. Elliot Yeo, what a star. He was one of the best players in the competition in his prime, and I love that he's getting back to that level of footy again. He's a fantastic footballer, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. He was outstanding in the grand final when they won the flag in 2018, and he was missing most of last year. You throw in Jake Waterman, who's kicked 11 goals in 2 weeks, 6 and 5.
Great story.
So he's really emerging there. Harley Reid got the nomination the week before, comes out and kicks 3 and has 20 from the midfield, shortens again in the rising star calculations, and all of a sudden West Coast are 2 and 4. I mean, it was a fortnight ago we were talking about the prospect of them not winning a game all year.
Ever again.
Yeah, and now they're 2 games clear of North, so at this stage they're unlikely to win the wooden spoon. So they've got the Gold Coast away this week, which is pretty tricky, but they come into it with momentum. They were good against the Swans a couple of weeks ago, so you never know.
A couple of other ones. St Kilda, obviously, on the Thursday night game. They got pumped by the Doggies, but I'm not reading into that too much, because St Kilda played 3 games in 11 days. That's got to mean something.
Yeah, it looked like it did. I mean, the Bulldogs came out breathing fire. The Bulldogs are a very good running side, so if you are slightly fatigued, that can happen. Look, I think, putting the St Kilda hat on, I don't think that's been their DNA under the last couple of years. They haven't played a game like that in quite some time. So I think if it's out of character, you put it down as being out of character unless it repeats itself. They've got their bogey side this week, Port, who they never beat. They've beaten them once in 12 years. So tricky one for them. But the challenge now is you've got 8 days prep. You got embarrassed last Thursday night. Respond.
Another one, we spoke about it on last week's episode, that if Essendon were to beat Adelaide, and we thought it was a massive chance that Zach Merritt would have a blinder and shorten in the Brownlow. He didn't shorten as much as I thought he would, but nevertheless, they got the chocolates over there. It was a great win by the Dons.
Clearly the better side too. I think they had 61 inside 50s to 43. They had 18 scoring shots to 28 scoring shots to 19. They kicked 10 goals, 18. I know there was the talk around the Draper hatching the ball at the end and whether he should have been penalised for holding it. But I think on the most part, Essendon were dictating terms in that game, and now we see them in one of the bigger Anzac Day games in a while, because Collingwood have found their feet. Essendon were 5 goals up on Anzac Day last year and lost. So, yeah, they'd be pretty keen to come out and right that wrong.
It's going to be interesting to see what the Betfair Exchange odds are going to be for that one. You'd think, chatting about it now, that they'll be close to even money both sides. So
at the moment, so Collingwood are $1.55, Essendon $2.80. So you'll get a handicap of a couple of goals in that game. The handicap at the moment is 12.5 points, so 2 goals.
So I think the reason for that firm on Collingwood has to come from their performance against Port Adelaide. They were down by 31 points, I think it was, and kicked the next billion goals in a row.
Had 38 scoring shots and 64 inside 50s, Collingwood. So that was very much like what they were doing last year, that brand. And, they beat Brisbane at the Gab, but then they were really scratchy against Hawthorn.
Mm-hmm.
Then they had the bye, so we were kind of like, well, how do they come out of that? And as much as that says a bit about Port, because the knock on Port had been, how do they stack up against the very best teams? They lost to Melbourne. They've now lost to Collingwood, so that question remains. The Pies are back in business by the looks of that.
What do you think of Carlton? Are they the real deal?
Absolutely. I mean, they've got... I know a lot of people point to the fact that the Giants had no Taylor and Cornelio, but Carlton's injury list is, as long as your arm, and they... particularly a lot of important players. I mean, Doherty won't be back this year, but Sard being unavailable and Williams and a host of others. And to do that, I think they kicked, 7 in a row, 8 in a row against a fantastic side in the Giants who were in control. They were 20 points up at the time. That's probably their best win. I know we look at Brisbane at the Gabba, but obviously they played poorly for 45 minutes in that game. This was an excellent victory. And their game against Geelong this week, followed by, I think, Collingwood on a Friday night, is a hell of a fortnight for them.
Yep. And just on that win, I was watching GWS thinking, far out. These guys are definitely the flag favourites. They were playing some fantastic footy without Sam Taylor and Coniglio as well. Carlton weren't playing bad at all. No. They just, against a really, really great opposition, were up against it until they just get their run on goals. And I don't think anyone in the competition can stop them when they're getting it right, can they?
Yeah, and so important is decoding, because we know about how good Curnow is.
Yep.
And we know that Mackay is playing really well. There was all that debate around how do they balance DeConing and Pitney in the ruck. But to have DeConing be able to ruck and then go forward and kick 3, there aren't many defences that can lock down Curnow, Mackay, and then deal with DeConing as well.
That's right.
That's a huge weapon for them.
Let's talk about the Brownlow medal. Obviously, the predictions are going crazy at the moment. We're nearing the halfway mark of the season, and we've probably got 3 or 4 more games until we get there. So what's the Brownlow predictor telling us so far?
Yeah, so Isaac Heaney was obviously quite short coming into this particular round. He played a solid game again. He had probably 30 and... I think he kicked a goal as well in a big win for the Swans. And as it stands at the moment, he sits at about 550, 510 actually. So he's the only player in single figures. You got Bontempelli at 11. Patrick Cripps will probably get 3 votes based on the prediction model from the week just gone.
I think if there were 6 available, he'd probably get the extra 3.
I mean, yeah, that's right. You never know with how these things work, but I think he's a very strong chance at obviously getting maximum votes there as well. And Nick Dacos played a very good game for Collingwood. I know Lipinski's kicked 4 in that, and others have contributed as well, but he's a good chance. Zach Merritt, who you mentioned, is expected to get 2.5, so a decent chance for a 3-vote game there. Still sitting around the 20s. So Isaac Heaney, just found him in the list there. He's predicted to get 1 vote. Bontempelli, 1 vote. Obviously, Aaron Norton kicked 6 in that game. Errol Goulden amongst the votes as well, who's not the forgotten Swan, but yeah, I think Nick Dacos for mine and Patrick Cripps are the 2 that I'd keep an eye on out of that, both with 3-vote games.
Well, let's go through some of the biggest firmers of the round, and the biggest one was Isaac Heaney, actually. He's getting to a short price. I know 620 only into 510 at the end of the round. The odds have probably changed slightly, but it doesn't seem like a big shift, but that is a 3% change in probability increase. So quite significant. The next one after that is Patrick Cripps, 2.9% increase in probability. Then it goes Zach Butters, Lachie Neal, and great to see Sam Walsh. He's had some fantastic games, 2 games back. He got to 100 plus.
Was about to mention him.
He's now in the $30 range currently on the exchange, and he's playing some great footy.
Yeah, and he missed the first couple, so he's just slotted back in seamlessly. So if he continues to accumulate those votes, and you'd suggest the price he's at now is the longest he'll be all year, so you'll keep an eye on him. But yeah, Cripps, Dacos, Merritt. are the three that stood out for me out on the weekend in terms of moves.
Just for the people listening or watching, can you read out the Brownlow predictor for us? Who's on top in our predicted votes?
So Isaac Heaney, 2 votes clear. He's predicted to have 10.5. So obviously, in terms of the predictor, if a player is a clear-cut best on ground, so Patrick Cripps predicted to get 3. If there are a couple of players that could get maximum votes, it's generally a 2.5 because it means they could get 2, they could get 3. Zach Merritt is a 2.5 for Essendon this week, for example. I'm not sure who the other player is. Jordan Dawson, 2.5, played a good game for Adelaide as well.
Couple of goals, 30 plus touches.
So Heaney, 2 votes clear of Patrick Cripps at 8.5. Then you got Rosie and Green, who was Tom Green, that is, who was favourite for up until about 2 weeks ago on 8 votes. Then Petrarca, who didn't play this week, Sarong and Merritt at 7.5. So they're the top half a dozen or so on the predictor.
Any bets you want to have? Just having a look here. It looks right now that Patrick Cripps is the value there, given
definitely.
his second in line, still $15 on the exchange. Tom Green probably is getting a little bit short there. I know that we sort of laid off him when he got to around that $6, $7 mark. Christian Petrarca, interesting one, 7.5 votes, still $18.5 on the exchange. Zach Merritt, thought he was going to shorten a little bit more in the Brownlow medal market, but $20 there, still potentially value. I think if he wins an Anzac Day medal, he's shortening into single figures.
And likewise, Nick Dacos in that same game. I just think if we look at Dacos last year, how many votes he got, he probably wins the medal if he doesn't get injured. Collingwood starting to find form, and so is he. There was all that question about his influence in the first month. He's polled 5 votes in his last 3 games based on the predictor. So I get the feeling that he'll be single figures pretty soon. So he's one of the major reasons why Collingwood look like they've rediscovered their best.
He did miss the votes in about 7 games in a row at the end of last season, given his injury. And I think he went off early in a game as well, went forward and just had no influence. So thinking about that, at this point now, he missed, according to the predictor, missed 3 votes in the first 3 games, then had 2 missed votes in the next 2 games, then had 3.
And one of them was a bye, so he's technically missed 1 game. So,
exactly. Using that theory, there's nothing to say that he won't have a really strong stretch where he's getting 3 vote games in a row. I definitely think that he did it last year. There's no reason why he can't do it this year. We got $18. He's probably one that you got to keep on backing if he's drifting, because he's just going to teach you a lesson if you don't.
And history's full of players winning a Brownlow a year after they were supposed to win a Brownlow, if that makes sense. So, I mean, Dane Swan did that. Chris Judd did that in the past with Carlton. Gary Ablett Jr. did it when he did his shoulder one year. He came back and won it the next year. So it does happen a lot that those generational players will almost immediately get their Brownlow karma. So I think he's right in the frame.
100%. All right. Well, that's enough on the Brownlow medal. Let's go to our buy, hold, and sell. Who are you buying this week, Daz?
I'm buying, apart from those 2 that I just mentioned, Cripps and Dacos, I still think the Giants, if you look at the minor premiership market, not to steal your thunder, there's a very short favourite in that, which is not them, and they were pretty short last week. I think they lost their way for a period against another very good side. I know they're a bit vulnerable this week with some suspensions, but I'm not off them by any means. So I still think the Giants offer value in most of those markets.
Yep, I agree with that one. Who are you holding on this week?
Holding on Essendon based on that fixture. They've done everything right so far this year, apart from one poor game in Adelaide when Port belted them a few weeks ago. But they're coming up against the reigning premiers. If they can beat Collingwood and go 5-2, then I think very much you're looking at them playing finals and having a very good season. But I think I'm just going to hold and see exactly where they sit, because I think Collingwood flex their muscles, and if Essendon can stand up to that, then they're pretty good.
I'm going to hold on Isaac Heaney. I think I held on him last week as well. He shortened again. I'm probably not convinced that he can go and win the Brownlow medal despite him playing some magnificent football. He's probably one that hasn't had that sort of Brownlow attention before. So where we think he might get 2 votes, he might get none. Where we think he gets 3, he might get 2 or 1. Obviously, Errol Goulden's playing some great football at the moment. So, yeah, I'm probably just holding a little bit on Isaac Heaney. I'd love for him to drift so I can have a little bet on him because he's currently my worst result in the Brownlow medal so far. Great to see Patrick Cripps playing some good footy and shortening. I'd love Nick Dacos to shorten a little bit more in the Brownlow medal. I backed him very early at around that $6 mark, and he's drifted heaps. So I'm just in a position where I've got to keep on backing him until he shortens, and then I can potentially trade out. So yeah, there's my hold. Who are you selling this week, Daz?
Look, the prices have nudged into double figures, but I don't think it would be a stupidly bold thing to say, but I don't think Brisbane or Port can win the flag. So you'd sell them at anything. I mean, obviously they can build a bit of form, but Brisbane have now lost 3 home games this year, 2 and 4. Look, they have to bounce back against the Giants this week. If they were to drop that, go 2 and 5, I think top 4 becomes a problem, and they're not going to win the flag from outside of there. And I think for Port, coming out of last year when they went out in straight sets, admittedly they've lost a couple of close games, but losing to Melbourne and then getting belted by Collingwood in the same fashion that they got belted by Collingwood at almost the exact same part of the season last year, I haven't seen anything so far to suggest that Brisbane or Port Adelaide can win the flag. Good sides, but not good enough. So sell them at anything, really.
I'm going to sell the Geelong Cats. Now, that's no insult to the Geelong Cats. I love what Brad Scott has done with them. He's an absolute freak of nature, but I still don't think they're as good as what the market is suggesting. They're now the shortest price in the top 4 market of any club in the AFL.
And very short, yeah.
Very short, currently $1.39. I don't think that their performances yet have indicated that they're a top 4 side fully this year. They've scraped through a couple of wins. I mean, we can go through them. Geelong had St Kilda in the first round, scraped through that one at Cardinia Park, and their form has been a bit up and down this year. Adelaide, they just beat. Hawthorn, they beat by 36 points. The Doggies at Gather Round were very, very close to beating them, but they got away there by 4 points, and I think the Doggies are not making the top 8. North Melbourne, obviously, they pumped. Their best win so far this year was against Brisbane at the Gabba, but that was in the wet. That's where Geelong thrive in those conditions. I don't think that they've played a top 8 team besides potentially Brisbane. I know they're out of form, but I don't think they've played a top 8 teams this year yet. $1.36 to back them for top 4. I reckon they're an awesome lay proposition because you don't need to spend a lot to lay them, but potentially you can get a lot back if they miss the top 4. And it's a very, very competitive spot. Obviously, you got Sydney, GWS, yep. Collingwood, who are now showing form. There's no reason they can miss the top 4 at this stage. Port Adelaide have shown that they could be around the mark. So I'm definitely laying Geelong top 4 this year.
Yeah, so you look at sides that could stop them finishing top 4. And as you say, it's pretty competitive. Collingwood, Carlton, Giants, Swans, D's. There's 5 that are right in the mix to potentially deny them a top 4 spot. So, and that's assuming that, Port will win enough games to put pressure on them. So Geelong can absolutely finish top 4, but it's not a lock by any means. And I think the premiership market being so close reflects that the Cats have come up a bit short there.
Well, their next few games, they've got Carlton, who I think Carlton are a better side than. I think Melbourne are a better side than Geelong, and they've got Port Adelaide, which is going to be a massive game. And if Geelong can beat Port Adelaide in that game, then I'll probably look to say that, they're a top 4 chance, but we got to say after 3 weeks. But at this point right now, they're way too short.
Yeah. If they come out and roll Carlton, then, but that's the thing. There are no certainties in it. You just look at the price and probabilities and think that they're a decent chance of being longer odds if Carlton beat them next week. So.
Yep. Did you do your sell?
I did my sell, which was Port and Brisbane, yep.
Well, let's look ahead at the games this weekend. Any games that you want to have a chat about?
Well, there's a couple. Obviously, we've got generally in the past, the Anzac Eve games had a bit on it in Richmond and Melbourne, but we know the Tigers are battling a little bit at the moment. But clearly the Anzac Day game itself is substantial, and that game we spoke about between Carlton and Geelong, they're probably the two that jump off the page. And Giants Lions is fascinating because the Giants have Canelio will still miss. They should get Taylor back, but they've got Hogan and Green at the tribunal, both facing 1 match bans. So if either of them get off, I think they'll shorten. The Giants and Brisbane are pretty much even money. The Lions have a poor travel record. The Giants are a very good system team, fair bit of depth. They've got the talls in defence that could tail Danaher and Hipwood. So I still think the Giants are a good price because if either Green or Hogan get off tonight, they'll shorten a bit. So, I wouldn't mind backing them at the price they currently are.
How do you feel about, weird question, how do you feel about the Anzac Day doubleheader? Obviously, Essendon and Collingwood play the first game starting at 3:20 and then the doubleheader follows with GWS and Brisbane after. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I know in the past they've done it when it's fallen on a Friday. They'll play a Friday night game in Perth or something like that, but it's unusual that they do that on a Thursday that we have this year. So, look, I don't think... I mean, Essendon and Collingwood, they're not the first teams to play on Anzac Day. There are Anzac games in the past, but they've certainly made that event what it is. Doesn't mean they own it, though, I guess. I mean, other sides can... as long as they're not clashing with each other, I don't mind it too much. I mean, personally, I'd argue Anzac Day is Australia's most significant day on the calendar. So, I think any chance you get to celebrate that around the country in different states is a good thing.
I totally agree that we obviously need to celebrate it, but Anzac Day is sacrosanct.
Yeah.
And we do an amazing job with the Essendon and Collingwood game. And really, it's a day of remembrance, reflection, honouring the heroes of, that fought in battle in Australia. I'm sorry, getting very political here.
Yeah.
But given the sacred notion of Anzac Day, I feel like 2 games is a little bit too much. It's the same as Good Friday. It used to be a day of reflection, where they close stores, you get time with your family. But now everything's commercialised. It's a really, really weird take, but I think the one game is enough, and let's really put all our tickets into that one, into making sure that we remember all of our heroes and fallen heroes, and move on to have those games at another day, and then use the rest of the day for reflection and remembrance.
We have obviously the Anzac Eve, which has become traditional now, and the pre-game Richmond-Melbourne under lights is special and all of that. But I think ultimately Anzac Day is about Anzac Day. So how does the AFL best commemorate that event? Is it one standalone game? Quite possibly. And look, Essendon and Collingwood are very good at being custodians of the day. I don't think either of them have ever considered themselves bigger than any other club in the competition. I think they're doing the best they can to honour that particular day, and I think the AFL's duty bound to do that as best they can. Spot
on. Any other games you want to look at? Obviously, we spoke a little bit about Geelong Carlton.
Yeah.
Carlton get 3 weeks in a row of that 4:30 game on the Saturday.
Yep.
Good time for them. They're clearly enjoying that, minus the Adelaide loss. But
where is that game, by the way? Is it? They're not going to the Cattery, are they?
No, they're not going to the Cattery. Looks
MCG.
like an MCG.
Yeah. So I think that helps Carlton quite a bit. I know they played at Marvel pretty well this year, and Geelong were good on Easter Monday at the MCG, but obviously avoiding a trip to the Cattery. I know they're unlikely to send Carlton there now, but that's a pretty good result for them. And the other one would be how the Bulldogs back up their performance and how Fremantle respond to their shocker, because they had a good year before that. So how does that game stack up on Saturday night, Fremantle Bulldogs in the West?
What are you doing with West Coast? Think they're a chance against the Suns?
Not quite. I mean, the Suns have been split right down the middle this year with 3-3. 3 good performances at home and battled on the road. Sydney fixed them up. They got flogged in Ballarat by the Dogs. Back at home, I think they'll be all right. I mean, West Coast beat Richmond in Perth and then won the Derby, so both games in their backyard. Maybe they could roll momentum in and start well and therefore cover the line, but that would probably be the best result. You'd be getting about 5 or 6 goals, but Suns a very different prospect at Metric.
Geez, I don't want to speak too soon, but I'm looking at the exchange now. I think Gold Coast currently value at $1.25.
Yeah.
They should be closer to $1.10. I know West Coast have had a couple of wins in a row, but they only had 2 or 3 wins last season.
3
wins, so... Yeah, just mathematically, I don't think they're any better than what they were last season. And
where do we sit? I mean, you can't trust North. I mean, there's always that saying, bad teams, bad odds. But I mean, they're 550. in Hobart against Adelaide. So it's an awkward fixture for the Crows, who aren't going that well. Clearly they're going better than North. But North's issue has been obviously disappearing in games for 20 minutes at a time. Hawthorn blew them away on Sunday in the second term in particular. But can North cover a line in that game, which is currently 5 goals? So
North are a massive chance in that game. I reckon they're due.
Yeah.
I reckon they're due, and I think the results against North have been pretty disastrous in terms of points. But early in the season, they were playing some really, really good football, and there was a lot of, even though that they were losing, there was a lot of media attention saying, oh, Clarko's got them going, so on and so forth. I think that's still there. I'm not against North, and I'm not going to pound them, because Clarko's clearly coaching for the future, not necessarily coaching for wins. If he was coaching for wins, Simpkin is going to 90% of North centre bouncers. I think he's averaging like 20% of them so far, playing across half forward. That's not where Simpkin plays his best football, but Clarko's elected to put McKercher in there, Georgie Wardlaw in there, and make sure that they get a real lesson into how to play AFL football. If he wants to get wins, then he's probably got to put Simpkin in there. And I think when the pressure starts to mount a little bit more about getting wins across the season, we're going to see Simpkin go in there a little bit more.
Yeah, and the next step for North is less of those lapses. The lapses are shorter. So they led Freo by 6 goals, then had a poor third quarter. They lost their way completely in the second quarter against Hawthorn. They were competitive against the Blues for a while and then dropped away. Good first half against the Giants, dropped away. So that's the key. So can they just sustain it a little bit longer each time? And yeah, I mean, 5 goal line, Hobart, it could be windy, it could be cold, it could be wet, who knows? That's a decent chance for them, I think.
I think they're worth a bet on the weekend. Just a little nibble, $5.50. I reckon they're something to have a look at. Daz, any other bets you're having this weekend?
Probably just that little nibble on the Giants, subject to the tribunal. I think they're not going to get longer in the market, and they might get shorter if that goes the right way for them. So I still think they've got enough to win anyway. So I'd probably have a look at that. And just that weather forecast for Hobart, 19 degrees, partly cloudy, chance of a shower for that game. So could still bring the scoring down. So.
It's a lay party for me. I'm laying Geelong minor premiership. They're 284 currently for the minor premiership. If they lose a couple of games in the next couple of weeks, they're definitely going to drift pretty big and lose favouritism there. So I'm laying them in the minor premiership market. Also laying them in the top 4 market. $1.36 is so short. I'd love to actually know what they are on the corporates. They'd probably be much shorter than that. I think the Geelong top 4 is so short. I know that they haven't lost a game this year, but we saw Melbourne win a fair few games in a row, and I think they missed top 4 that year. Was that right? 12 games in a row, and then they missed top 4. So it can happen. They'll have their spell this year where they lose a couple of games in a row, and you only need to lose a couple. So, it's a lay party, Geelong on my victim list.
So having a look at the top 4, Geelong $1.30 on the corporates. And in terms of minor premiership, 275, well clear of the Giants at 450.
Interesting.
The corporate average at the
moment. Well, currently
so.
The Giants are $4.70. Carlton next on $6. So, some interesting moves there. I'd probably be electing to go one of the interstate teams that have that home ground advantage. Sydney currently $7. Melbourne are an interesting one, $10.50. I reckon they're a super side this year. I don't think that they should be $10.50. They're going to shorten. I might back them in the minor premiership market as well. That's all we got time for, Daz. Good luck, Anzac Day. It's going to be a cracking day. Good day reflection, remembering our heroes. It's a really special game. I'm really looking forward to the Richmond and Melbourne game as well the night before on Anzac Day. Eve, everyone, good luck punting this weekend. We'll see you next week on Trade Talk.
What are you really gambling with? For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.
Hey there, footy fans. If you're enjoying all the banter and insights on AFL Trade Talk, we would love it if you could hit the subscribe button. Your support means the absolute world to us and ensures that you'll never miss an episode. And while you're at it, why don't you leave us a quick rating? It helps us grow and keeps the Betfair trade chat going. Thanks for tuning in, and let's keep those predictions rolling.